everyone, and welcome to this ICEF webinar in cooperation with Salesforce called the 3 Degrees of Evolution, how increasing competition for international students is driving change in student recruitment marketing. My name is Martijn van Veen. I'm the Vice President of Business Development here at ICEF, and I'm in very good company today. In the next hour, representatives of the Universitat Oberta de Catalunya, the ESSEC Business School from France, and the London School of Economics and Political Science will be discussing how they are applying 3 of the latest trends in digital student recruitment marketing in response to a rapidly changing and increasingly competitive student recruitment landscape. Before we dive into those 3 case studies, we will first start the webinar with an impression of that landscape. Together with 2 senior industry specialists, we will paint a picture of the various factors that are causing change. Think of the 4th industrial revolution, also called the digital revolution, the changing government policies in important study destinations, the rise of new study destinations, and the exponential growth of online and hybrid programs and alternatives, and of course, the impact of COVID-19. Then after the 3 case studies, we will take a closer look at the digital tools that are mentioned. And at the end of the webinar, we have a gift for you, courtesy of Salesforce.org. During the webinar, at the start of each case study, we also have a series of polls on which we will ask your feedback. And this webinar is being recorded. You can ask questions via the Q&A button in the bottom of your screen, and a colleague of mine will provide an answer. We will get back to you via email. Joining me for this first part of this webinar to walk us through some of the factors that are causing change in the student recruitment landscape are Craig Riggs, editor of ICEF Monitor, and Corey Snow, director of Education Industry Solutions at Salesforce. Welcome to Craig and Corey. I'm very happy that they are joining us today. Craig, if I may start with you, I think it helps if we look at the changes in the student recruitment market from 2 different angles, the demand side, the students, and the supply side, the programs and their formats. Could you briefly introduce yourself and then walk us through some of the recent and expected changes and trends on the demand side, please?
Yeah, thanks, Martijn. And as you say, I'm the editor of ICEF Monitor, and our brief at Monitor is to really follow the trends and issues that are affecting international student mobility. And we have a particular focus on international student recruitment. And so the team and I spend our days trying to understand how the marketplace is unfolding and what some of the near-term and longer-term trends are that are going to impact international student mobility. And I think the way you've framed the discussion today is really interesting, because I think we do see some significant change afoot, both on the demand side and on the supply side. In terms of demand, you know, we are working in an industry that has been marked by really significant growth for decades now. You know, especially if we look at that period from about 1990 till about 2010. Globally, student mobility expanded a great deal over that time. And even just, you know, taking a narrower frame, even that period from let's say 2005 to 2020, again, we see just dramatic growth. Overall growth over that period was on the order of 60–70% worldwide, right? And that works out to an average annual growth of about 7% in student mobility. And what we began to notice, however, is that from about 2010 on, the pace of that growth began to slow. And so in fact, later forecasts made within the last, 5 or 6 years indicate a slowing of growth through 2030 and perhaps a little bit after that. And the projections there are that annual growth will fall from about 7% per year down to about 2% per year. And why is that? It's largely because of some demand side factors in in China, which has been the engine of growth globally for decades now. We see a dramatic expansion in higher education provision in China. We see a lot of important demographic changes, and in particular, a significant dip in the college age population, that college age cohort in China. And so educators around the world that have relied on that key Chinese market literally for decades to help meet their growth targets are now facing a situation where, on the one hand, that growth is slowing, and on the other hand, they can't rely on China in the same way. China will continue to be an important market for years still, but it won't be the full answer in terms of growth for institutions and schools around the world. And that opens up a greater need, something we've been talking about for years, but a greater need still for institutions to diversify their international student enrollment base. And I think now, as we move into the latter stages of the pandemic and the recovery after the pandemic, we can expect a much more intensely competitive environment for international student recruitment, and a great deal of emphasis on diversifying the international student body with students from emerging markets around the world.
Thank you, Greg. Now, there's this talk about a fourth wave of global student mobility. Where is that wave mainly coming from when you're seeing that the growth in China is staggering?
It's coming from markets where we see not only strong growth in that college-aged cohort, people in their late teens and early 20s. So markets throughout South Asia, throughout Africa. But the other characteristic, aside from demographics, that's really significant about those markets is the growth of the middle class. So with respect to Asia alone, the middle class is expected to grow by a factor of 4 or 5 through 2030, from where we were in early 2010s. And as the middle class expands in emerging economies, so does demand for higher education in particular. And that is a major factor that will continue to support continuing growth in global student mobility.
And that growth also comes from lifelong learning, isn't that true?
It is, and that's a really important point, I think, as well, is that, and these are things that are frankly that are harder to measure. There are a number of factors that are in play that either promote or dampen international student mobility. And one of those factors is that, as you alluded to in your opening, we certainly see a great expansion in learning options right now in terms of hybrid programs, in terms of online learning, in terms of non-traditional qualifications, so micro-credentials or other alternate qualifications outside of the traditional degree model. And so, yeah, that is one of the factors that we're watching closely. It's harder to measure at the moment because these trends are literally, we're just watching them take shape in front of our eyes, especially with the pandemic as an accelerator for some of that trend towards online learning.
Great, thank you, Craig. So we see a diversification, let's say, in a number of countries where international students come from. Diversification in the types of students from let's say the younger students and the lifelong learners. But then there are also lots of changes on the supply side. Corey, that brings me to you. Can you walk us through some of the main changes and trends in the student recruitment landscape from the perspective of the supply side, in addition to a brief introduction of yourself, of course?
Hi, I'm Corey Snow. I'm from the Education Cloud team at Salesforce.org. We focus on what I describe as providing human-centric technology to higher education, and really excited about the stories that will come forth later today from some of our trailblazers that are out on the edge of deploying our technology in new and interesting ways. But I think Craig raised some really interesting shifts that are happening in the marketplace. I really admire what's happening with China as a factor. For example, China's actually becoming a destination for international students from other places, including, as Craig mentioned, that these demographic shifts really favor into this next century areas that are growing in the traditional student age demographic, specifically Africa. And as places like China have kind of a decline in the demographic age for traditional student, places like Africa have a rise in that same area, and also a growing wealth, fortunately, which is great. And as wealth grows in new areas around the world, including the Pacific Rim, but also emerging economies like Africa, we'll probably see a lot more student mobility out of places that haven't traditionally been sources for international students. And as recently as 10 years ago, the number of students that were flowing with mobility out of places like China and India were not particularly large. And now this is a major force in the marketplace. So there's a lot changing, definitely a lot shifting. And demographics is really only part of the story, because we also have all of the sort of geopolitical challenges, including immigration. And then we've got the COVID layer dropped on top of all of that. So, for example, after long growth in participation globally in the US, immigration policy made the US look less attractive. And we actually saw, for the first time in a long time, a small decline in international participation in the US. And then Australia, where higher education had recently become their second largest export by GDP, because they pursued a strategy of attracting students to Africa, to Australia, particularly from the Pacific Rim. The Fortress Australia policy with COVID made it very difficult, or more or less impossible, for students to arrive in Australia. So we could see that that's benefited other destinations, including the UK, which is through COVID actually seen a rise in participation from international students. So these shifts are all really important. One of the things that we've seen all around the world is that students actually do want to go in person. So whether that's good for from an epidemiological perspective, from spreading a virus, we've definitely seen that campuses that open have better enrollment. Nations that allow international students to arrive have had greater participation. So the students really want that in-person experience. That's part of what they're getting out of traveling to another country to get their education. Though one of the things that I thought was interesting is that at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of gloom and doom around what might happen with international student participation, partly because the interviewing was of students who they were hoping would return, typical prospective students that might come. And in those polls, it looked really grim. There were numbers out there where they were saying we might have a decline of, say, 30% or a third, right? What actually happened was the declines were much less, partly because when the learning went virtual, that opened up the possibility of new participants in those source countries that never would have traveled. This actually opened up a new venue to participate from new audiences, from new learners. So these are some really interesting mega trends. But then we mentioned lifelong learning, and it may be that as we go into this next century, where the rate of change is accelerating at all times, and our more traditional episodic learning, where education is a phase of life that is highly centered on an age between maybe 18 and 22 or 18 and 24. This next wave, Martijn, you mentioned the fourth industrial revolution. In the fourth industrial revolution, we're likely to need something that looks more like continuous ambient learning at all times, where we can expect to have 5 or 6 discrete careers in fields that have yet to even be invented today. And that really requires a different kind of learning. So I think in terms of education, we need education to be more abundant for humanity, not just to be more inclusive, of other regions and emerging economies, but also of learners of all ages, and the ability to meet learners where they live with the learning that they need in the format and also the sort of sizing that they need, because it may be that the macro credential, the degree, is not the learning opportunity that would best serve these learners and their needs at any particular point in their professional and personal development.
You're mentioning a couple of very interesting points there, Corey, and one is what that you mentioned is the students will still want to study in person. A recent article also on ICEF Monitor, Craig, was that for every student that gets to study overseas, around 3 or 4, I believe, would have wanted to study abroad, but were unable to for various reasons, which creates opportunities for the providers of micro-credentials. You just mentioned them, Corey. Opportunities maybe for shorter and more affordable programs, opportunities for alternative destinations closer to home, opportunities for online learning. So this is an article, I believe, Craig, you have also published on in ICEF Monitor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's to me, that's one of the most fascinating statistics we've seen on Monitor for a little while now. And it just speaks to some of the underlying trends that we're exploring today in terms of the changing culture of education globally, the increasing mix of delivery models that we see in use around the world. And I think that's a fascinating proposition that, the most visible part of global student mobility is the several million students that leave their home countries and go to another country to study in some aspect of post-secondary education every year. But what that article that you're referring to points out is that there are many more millions lying behind that student cohort that would study abroad or would engage in study if they could, for reasons of lifestyle or affordability or access to education. And I think there's an interesting opportunity and a challenge for educators around the world there to reach those students in a variety of different ways. It doesn't mean they'll all become online students. It means that they may be drawn into programs via different types of pathways that we're used to seeing in the past. But I think it opens the door to a new culture of experimentation and expansion in terms of what international education delivery could really look like.
So true. Well, thank you, Craig and Corey. Now that we have a bit of a picture of the dynamics in student recruitment, let's move to the 3 case studies as examples of how institutions respond to all that change. And Craig, Corey, we'll see you again after the case studies. And joining me for this first case study is Tellez, Commercial Director of the Universitat Oberta de Catalunya, or UOC. Benvingut, Daniel. It's good to have you with us for this first case study titled Engaging Students Through Personalized Mobile Experience, which refers to the fact that the UOC creates personalized email and SMS journeys for prospective students with content tailored to their country of origin, degree of interest, and personal motivations. I'll ask you for a brief introduction in a second, but first allow me to pull up our first poll for the audience to respond to, and here it is. Let me read it out for you. Personalized marketing is an indispensable factor for student recruitment success. So personalized marketing, that's tailored marketing, segmentation based on the prospective student profiles, etc. And as the audience is responding to this poll, Daniel, may I ask you first for a brief introduction of yourself and of the Universitat Oberta de Catalunya.
My name, as you mentioned, is Daniel Tellez. I'm the Commercial Recruiting Director at Open University of Catalunya, UOC. I'm really glad to be here and have this opportunity to share with you this time and conversation. Well, first of all, let me give you some background on my university. Open University of Catalonia, UOC, anticipated the future in 1994 when it was created as the first worldwide online university. And developing for that and from scratch our unique learning model. However, now we are 77,000 active students that are living on more than 140 different countries. However, being a full 100% online university makes it very difficult to create a sense of belonging during the recruiting process. We also lack the global awareness as other hosts today have, such as London School of Economics or ESSEC. This is why at UOC we moved to Salesforce for exploiting marketing automation and personalization to help our prospects to be willing to join our community.
Daniel, this is maybe a good moment for you to explain in your own words why personalized marketing is so important and why now.
Yeah. Personalization is key for many reasons. In our case, being an online university, even more. We are focused 100% on lifelong learning. Okay, so it means that we work with adult working professionals, generally 30 plus years old, and we must find the perfect match between their professional needs and our wide portfolio. So we need to personalize a lot our proposal and our journey. This on the one side. Moreover, because we are online, automatically our audience is global. And so we have to deal with a huge number of very different demographics, academic backgrounds, and professional expectations. If you try to deliver the same one-to-all communication, it will fail because the audience is very, very diverse. So personalizing in a one-to-one basis is the only way of having success.
Personalizing on one-to-one basis. So are you saying that you are currently, or the objective is to have a personal message for every single prospective and existing student?
Yeah, that's our objective from the very beginning. In fact, let's explain maybe for something about our recruiting model and how we apply it for a full personalization. Our recruiting model, we use a multi-channel approach. Okay, we integrate in real time all data gathered through all channels. Then with that data based on Salesforce, we score each prospect to define which content and which journey to apply. And then we deliver through all the channels this, and we apply this personalized journey and content. Okay, so it's a multi-channel approach. We use mainly a lot of channels, but the main ones are the emailing that we deliver using Salesforce and Marketing Cloud. And the other channel is a phone call, our call center that has a first level of people giving a first assessment, and the second level of more than 500 academic advisors. Okay, so as you see, we have a multi-level approach, and the idea is to gather the information, to score the prospect, and to personalize the messaging.
Right. So you personalize the message, and what criteria do you use? Which characteristics? I can imagine it's where they are living, their age, their study background. Which other characteristics are you looking at for your personalized messages?
Yeah, we personalize based on three big areas. No? The first one is on the personal data of the prospect. The second one is the level of engagement and probability of enrollment that we detect. The third area is the progression on the funnel, on the recruiting funnel. No? Let me explain a little bit more on each one. On personal data, we personalize on demographics. Okay, this means we personalize content and journey according to country of origin, to language, of course. In this case, for example, we provide testimonials from that country. We explain about specific scholarships and grants we can have in that specific country or area. We also personalize on local academic background, because when you go global, the academic background is very diverse. So in this case, we personalize how different grades match with, in this case, the European model on the one side. And also we suggest personalize which of our programs can match better with the previous background. Also, we personalize according to the previous experience or fears of the prospect on studying online. And for instance, if the person has never studied online, then suddenly all our messaging will include some testimonials from people that had never studied online and explaining their experience and so on. And finally, we also personalize about personal data on economic level of its prospect. And in this case, when we see that there can be some economical problems to access to our university, we focus on specific grants and how we can change the payment terms and things like that. After every prospect has been speaking with our call center, we inform our CRM about the expected interest of this person on our program or on our university. Depending on the perceived interest, we assign a specific journey or another one, okay? And also, we mix all the information from Marketing Cloud, from our email messaging about opening rates, click-through rates, and so to elaborate more on the level of engagement. And according to this level of engagement, we keep changing our journeys. Okay? And finally, the last level of personalization is funnel progression. How in which stage of the funnel is this prospect? We do not have the same communication if it's just a request for information, or if this person has already spoken to our academic advisor. And these are the main. At this moment, we are thinking on more things in the future, but at this moment, these are the main attributes for personalization.
I know that is quite impressive, which is maybe not surprising because of the fact that UOC is the first university ever to run exclusively online. Not surprising that the UOC is at the forefront of the latest tools and applications. And all the things you just mentioned require the treatment of a lot of data, so for which I'm sure using specific tools. We'll get to that later. I have a question about something you mentioned earlier, the probability of enrollment. Can you talk about how do you measure that probability?
We are working on our CRM. Our core tool is Sales Cloud. Okay. However, it's and in Sales Cloud, for each opportunity or for each case, we have created a specific field called scoring that accumulates different information from the call center, from where we use Service Cloud, in this case, from the emailing marketing that we are doing, as I said, with Marketing Cloud. And we select different indicators that will add some kind of points to this scoring. And the more points you have, the more probability you have of enrollment. And then, according to this, we deliver a specific journey and a specific frequency on our communications.
That is wonderful. I just mentioned something that triggered me as well. You mentioned future wishes and future projects. Can you give us an impression of what's your next step?
One of the steps we are working on now is about professional guidance, career opportunities. Keeping in mind that our students are, as I told you, working professionals, 30 plus years old. For them, it's very important the professional growth. And so we are now working on creating artificial intelligence engine where people can enter a lot of data on their interest, on their competences, on the geographical area and professional interest also, and then obtain different paths, different proposals for studying all kind of programs from our portfolio. And so this information will be integrated in our recruiting process and be used also to personalize our messaging during the process.
Wonderful. Artificial intelligence, another hot topic in our sector, which brings me to the second case study. Thank you very much, Danielle, for sharing your story with us. We'll see you again after the third case study, but I'd like to move on to the second case study this webinar, which is with Patti Brown, Director Global MBA at ESSEC Business School in France. Bienvenue, Patti. Great to have you with us today. Patti, let me first pull up a quick poll. We checked this poll is correct, which reads as follows. We make active use of artificial intelligence to boost our international student recruitment and marketing efforts. Artificial intelligence, you can think of automated processes, chatbots, or AI-assisted CRM systems, and your answer options are yes. We do use artificial intelligence since before the pandemic. Yes, we started doing so during the pandemic. Not yet, but planning to do so within the next 12 months, or no, or not sure. And as the audience is responding to this poll, Patti, can you please give us a brief introduction?
Yes, sure. Well, thank you for having me. I would like to first excuse the noise behind because I'm living the international experience now. I'm with my global MBA in Brussels. They're doing a field trip in Brussels and in Amsterdam. So we'll be going to your city soon. And they're learning about Belgian breweries right now. So I am the director of 3 programs at ESSEC, the Global MBA, which is 95% international. It's a 1-year MBA program. The ENI program, which is a 2-year hospitality program, celebrating 40 years this year. And then the last program is a master's in water conservation with agriculture. So that's me.
Great. Water cultivation probably applies also to the brewery. Patti, before we look at the at your case study, let's look at the poll results. I'm curious to see how the audience has responded. We make active use of artificial intelligence to boost our international student recruitment and marketing efforts. So there's about 39% that are using it, some before the pandemic, since during the pandemic. A quarter is planning to do so within the 12 months. Patti, what do you think of these results? Did you expect a higher or lower use of artificial intelligence by your colleagues worldwide?
Well, I would expect that people are confused on how to use it. So I think those answers pretty much reflect everybody's feeling and opinion on it right now, because it's a tough year. We don't know how to use it. We don't know how to focalize things. And we really started out with baby steps by using this to apply to 2 key populations for any international program, meaning India and China. India, you have a lot of organic leads that come your way, and you need to use bots to filter those. You get lots of emails every day or inquiries on, do you have scholarships? If someone is sending you a message on that, you need a bot to clean that up so you focus your recruiter's attention on people that have a serious desire and the ability to come to your school. China is another one that's a very important client. My MBA is like every MBA in the world. It's a third China, a third India, and a third the rest of the world. We saw a decline, obviously, in Chinese. So how are we targeting and answering their questions in terms of safety here? We know that each country has its own news that's special, that warns its population. How are we reassuring the Chinese population right now on sanitary conditions in Europe? So these are some of the things we've been doing with AI that have really shown that they're working. We started off also last year during the COVID situation using AI to target, reassure, and for client retention on the American population. Everybody saw the American population go down. The cohort that's coming in September for the MBA, I've never had so many Americans on the program. So we see that it works. When I came on board at ESSEC 3 years ago, we were not using Salesforce. We obviously are using it now, and it seems to be working. It's helping out the recruiters and the staff. I can see now where my students are coming from, have a history of it, and then using EDA coming in to find out, to alert of absences, alert us if there's any problems. So that's how we're using AI.
Right. So when AI is often perceived as this magical solution for everything, but AI, of course, depends on how you feed the system with the right data and how you make the AI do the right analysis. How you talked about baby steps. How do you feed AI system with the right data? Because your prospective students are from such different backgrounds, from such different countries. They're also different. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, use baby steps on. We have a small staff like everybody else. The resources are limited. So number one, how do you filter? How do you use AI to filter only what would you do is qualified leads of people that are serious. So you're going to use for each country in your Salesforce software, feeder schools. Is this a school we've had people from before? What's the content of the email? Is these serious questions? Or they, once again, just asking for a scholarship and things like this. So those are baby steps. Once you start getting those baby steps, you can do 10 times. You're going to get a thirst to go further and saying, my goodness, how can I filter this even more? What can I feed it to where when I actually need to have a person pick up the phone and call someone and have a conversation about their educational future, that it's a serious and engaging conversation on both sides.
So it's a learning curve on your end as well, the use of an AI system.
Completely.
And what have you learned from the introduction of artificial intelligence in your student admission and enrollment process? Has it brought you some new insights that you didn't expect before starting to use it?
Well, it brought me a lot. What I didn't realize, and this is a gross generalization, is that I have a small MBA cohort, and I'm using the MBA because it's the easiest one right now as an example, but it's applied to others. You can actually trace and track feeder schools in Lebanon or anywhere in the world that consistently produce good, solid students. I'm in an MBA program where we're trying to go up in the rankings. So we need students that perform, that have consistently been good on the program. And that also helps us with client retention because we can connect them with alumni from our program to ensure them that it's a good program, it's quality, it's where they need to go. So that's really what we've been doing. And I was surprised to come up with a list that was very small of these incredible schools around the world that send us the best students, and really work with them, work with those schools, work with alumni to tailor make the program for them.
Right, so you seem to be able to focus really thanks to the AI program. Can you use AI for the admissions and enrollment process of all your programs? I mean, in other words, is the successful use of AI related to specific types of programs that ESSEC offers?
Well, it would depend on what you referred to earlier, how you feed it, what levers what dials you're going to turn in there. I don't see now, but I'm a layman and I've just started this. So I don't see how it could not apply. It's only a time saver when you use the right tools. And of course, you have to take some time to dial in everything in the beginning. But then your recruiters, your salespeople, and even the students that end up on your program, on the right program, are all happy. So take the time now, save the time, and get the right people on the right program.
Thank you, Patti. I think that among our audience, there is a fair share of people that may have what's called the fear of the unknown. It sounds all a bit vague, and for those that have never used artificial intelligence, what are some of the tips and tricks that you could share with your colleagues worldwide who are considering the use of an AI tool?
Well, I'm old, so I agree with them. I don't like change. I have a hard time. Really rely on people who know what they're talking about. IT could go up, they're patient with you, spend a lot of time with them, walk them through, and get a lot of people around the table, because each one of us individually don't have the answer. Collectively, we do, and we can find this together. So that was the biggest thing. I sat down, had the IT folks, talk with the finance folks, talk with the recruiters, and talk with the program teams, and even our rankings and our academic directors, we can't forget them, to come around the table, find out what kind of people we were looking for, and then have IT and Salesforce walk us through exactly how that was going to come to fruition. And that's what works. Get everybody around the table.
And Patti, did you get any advice yourself from other institutions or schools that had already implemented?
Of course, you know, in education, what I love, it's a real, I want to call it a sisterhood, because mostly women are in education. So it's nice to see so many men on the call today. We're not used to it. But I have never, I was in, I went on non-education industry for 20 years prior to coming to ESSEC. And I have never in any industry seen so many people trying to help so many people do so many great things. At the end of the day, we all have the same goal, offer quality programs that help people advance their lives. So yes, other federal schools have been absolutely invaluable to my experience in the journey for our students.
That's a great statement, Patti. Now, Patti, although artificial intelligence does save us time, it unfortunately does not allow us to buy time. I know you've got a train to catch to Amsterdam, but we'll move on to our, thank you very much, Patti.
Thank you, I'll see you soon. Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thank you. It's
Bye.
time to move on to our third case study in this webinar, which is with Phil Wood, Marketing Manager of the London School of Economics and Political Science. Good afternoon, Phil. Thank you for joining us today as well from London. Phil, we have a poll at the start of this case study as well, and it reads as follows. Quote, we use a CRM solution, a customer relationship management solution that is specifically tailored to the international student recruitment and admission processes, unquote. The answers that you can choose from are yes, we do so since before the pandemic, or yes, we've started doing so during the pandemic. The answer is not yet, but we're planning to do so within the next 12 months. And then there are, of course, those that are not using it or that are unsure. Those are your 5 options. And as the responses to this poll are coming in, Phil, may I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'm Phil Wood, and I'm the Market Manager at the London School of Economics and Political Science. LSE has been around since 1895, and we're based in central London. We're a specialist single faculty social science institution, so we teach all the social sciences. We have over 40 undergraduate programs and over 170 graduate programs. And we're a very international institution, and we have students from over 140 countries in the world on campus at any one time.
Those are some very impressive statistics, Phil. I imagine that you would have answered the poll with yes since before the pandemic, the use of a CRM. Let's look at what the audience has responded. And here we see that indeed the large majority is using a CRM that's specifically tailored to international student recruitment and marketing processes. Is this a surprise to you, Phil, or did you expect this?
No, it's not a surprise. Slightly, the one slight surprising element is the fact that there are so many who are planning to do so within the next 12 months. I would have thought that figure would have been a little bit higher. No, sorry, a little bit lower, and that more people were using it already. Yeah,
I can imagine that lots of people are using a generic CRM system, but indeed, I would say that looking at the landscape that Craig and Corey painted at the beginning of this webinar, it's getting so complex and so diverse that indeed you might want to consider using a tailored CRM as you are doing. Phil, I read that the LSA Student Marketing and Recruitment and Admissions teams has the objective to unlock deeper insights on their prospective students and deliver bespoke applicant experiences. What does this mean, and have you been able to implement this approach?
I remember, if I go back in history, I remember 20 years ago, prospective students to make their university choices based upon a paper prospectus or a departmental brochure. They might even attend an open day, and they'll talk to friends, teachers, and parents about where they want to go to university. And international students, certainly in the UK, weren't as common as they are nowadays. It was a very small niche market 20, 25 years ago. But times have certainly changed, and millennials, Generation K, however you want to term them, they've kind of moved more online. And for us as an institution, we had to do that as well. We had to follow them. We had to operate in the same sphere that they were in. So we took the decision to recruit students overseas, but give them a personalized, tailored experience, so that it wasn't just a case of if we traveled over there for a visit to a fair, to schools, that students would have the one-off opportunity, maybe once a year, maybe once every other year, to speak to a person, a representative, and ask them any questions they had, or indeed order a paper prospectus and then have a look on there. So what we try to do instead is deliver like an online consumer marketplace experience for them. So we get people to sign up with our CRM system. They can sign up whether they request a prospectus, whether they just want to sign up for further information, whether they want to attend a webinar, or indeed just to meet a member of staff overseas. So they input into the CRM system. And then when we have their data, we can then send them targeted communications that we think would be of interest to them, so that we can explain to them, look, this is what we offer. These are the experiences that you could have. This is why we think LSE might be a good institution for you. And it's a give and take experience, because they can look at this information and say, oh, this is fantastic, I want to learn a bit more. And then you can click on links contained within our email correspondence, go to our website to find out more, and then hopefully they'll find out more, or they can go into our website and look at it and say, actually, this isn't necessarily for me. I don't see myself fitting in here. This isn't the program I want to study. I don't actually want to live in the centre of London. I prefer to be on a more rural campus, if you like. And it just gives us the opportunity to let students know, this is what we have, this is what's available, and you can find out more. As has been alluded to throughout the webinar already, the HE sector is a very competitive sector, and having a CRM system allows us to deliver personalized communications to students. And as has just been demonstrated by the poll, this can be very useful to differentiate yourself from competitors as well. So that if a prospective student sees, oh, actually, yeah, I'm getting information that's relevant to me. This isn't just some generic content that could have been sent to anybody. This is specific to me. This is interesting to me. That this institution makes an effort. They're more. I can see myself fitting in here a bit more. To use an example from a retail environment, I'm sure everyone does this. You sign up for loyalty cards and schemes that different retailers offer. And I'm always amazed by how they don't segment and differentiate, or certainly some don't. I'm thinking of one or two in particular here, but I'm not going to mention them. And that you'll get constantly, maybe once a week, once a fortnight, information that's completely irrelevant to you. For instance, you can quite clearly see my background, but then I'm sent information that is no interest to me whatsoever. And after a while, I'm going to, you know what, I'm just going to unsubscribe for this, because this isn't giving me the information I require. You know my interests, I've told you them already. If I've given you that, why are you providing me with information that's irrelevant and of no interest? I'm just going to switch off and unsubscribe. And I've always tried to have that in the back of my mind when we're setting up our campaigns and running our CRM system, that you need to think carefully about what information you request, so that then you can deliver the information that students are looking for.
So true, Phil. I guess I would fully agree that today's customer actually expects any organization that wants to sell them or introduce them to something, that information is tailored to their background, at least to a certain level. Now, you're able to tailor your message and your programs to the prospective customer, prospective students, based on their backgrounds, based on their location. But does it also work the other way around? Have you actually, because of the insights and the feedback and the data that you've generated from prospective students, has it made you also change and adjust certain programs and your offering and portfolio of courses?
I wouldn't go so far as saying that, oh yeah, it's influenced our programs and portfolio. What I would say certainly is we work in the student marketing recruitment team, and we as I've kind of mentioned, we promote the undergraduate and graduate programs. But LSE also has summer school, has executive education. We also have student services divisions and such like. And what the CRM system has enabled us to do is show the success that we've had in our department, our sphere, and we can then roll it out to other areas of the school. I should mention alumni as well, because obviously that's a major component the school. So what it's enabled us to do that way is to share our knowledge and success so that we can roll it out around the rest of the school via a single source, which is Salesforce.
And have you been able, because of your CRM solution, to identify new demographics, new potential demographics of prospective students?
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting when you look at the data collection, what lead generation forms bring in, because sometimes it's surprising, as in, oh, I didn't think we were going to get students from that particular continent, that particular country, or even that demographic. What we try to do in the first instance when we're setting up our lead generation forms is get relatively basic information in the first instance to encourage people to sign up and to give us some key information that we can then send them, again, personalized information. But after a couple of emails, a couple of communications, we can then ask them to give us further information so that we can really drill down into details, so that we might start quite broadly in terms of subjects. We say, look, these are subjects that we offer, but not mention programs, because it's very difficult, certainly if you're a 15, 16, 17-year-old student studying at school, to know exactly what program you want to study for 3, 4 years of your life. So if we let them say, look, I'm interested in these subject areas to begin with, then when they come back and say, I'm interested in this, then we can break it down further and say, look, these are the programs that you may not have considered before, or indeed you might have done, but these are the options that are available, and you can find out a bit more there. So we certainly use it in that sense. And also, we also use it for targeting parents and teachers as well. Because I remember when we first set it up, we weren't sure what level of, I think it's helicopter parents is one of the terms that's used. We weren't sure what sort of level of interest we get from parents, but it's proved very popular. And if we hadn't tried it, we'd never have known. So just having a separate stream of email communications that can go out to parents, which are obviously very different to what we send out to teachers and to prospective students, that's also been a useful element that our lead generation forms have helped us with.
Indeed, the parents are, of course, a very important target group, especially in the international student demographic. Now, you seem a very savvy user of the latest digital technologies and probably up to speed on what's next. A similar question that I asked Daniel: what is next on your wish list? Which new digital technologies do you expect to implement, or would you want to exist?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, one of the first things I say before even getting onto new technologies is, the minute you stand still on a CRM system and with your digital technologies is the minute where things might start to go backwards. Because one of the key things for me, whenever you start a new marketing campaign, a new email campaign, is receiving the information and the level of engagement and the analytics from that campaign, so you can then go and revisit what it is that you set up to improve it, because you can never have it perfect. So to instantly get the data back in, you can then go and start to improve on what you've got. So I always like the idea of a continuous improvement cycle. An example I would give, last year we started using Marketing Cloud for the first time, and we set up a undergraduate email campaign to go out to all our prospective students. It went out to the total number of emails, not to individual students, but the whole campaign. It went out to 140,000. We sent out 140,000 emails. We had a very good click-through rate. I think we got about 7% click-through rate, so I was very pleased with that. One of the core elements that I put inside that campaign was about student life, because we were always getting survey data saying, and indeed third-party survey data saying that students wanted to know more about student life. So I was insistent on putting in 4 or 5 emails about student life. And the first couple of emails did really well. The click-through rates were very high. The open rates were very high. But then it transpired that when the 4th and 5th ones came in, actually the interest level dropped off. So we realized what we have to do is incorporate a bit more into the initial emails and not send out quite as many. So it's always about improving what you've got. Similarly, we use it for event management, which has massively improved how our events go. And we also introduced live chat and service desk for email queries. So rather than have a generic, I'm sure a lot of you either have this or used to have a generic email address where any emails that you wanted to send the admissions team would go into, and then you, even though the answers in most instances would be on the website, and you'd have to trawl through them and empty them out. And as you can imagine, coming back after a Christmas period or Easter or any holiday, the email box was always inundated full of emails that actually most of the answers were already on the website. So we set that up, and we received, well, we also had the frequently asked questions on there. So if someone asked a question, and, oh, here's actually the answer. So that reduced our inbox by, I think it's about 90%. So it made a huge saving there, and also gave students the information that they required. So those are the key things that we always wanted to install, and we're looking to improve from there. But then after that, I think it's already been touched on, things like chatbots and AI, they're very useful. And maybe the next step in our development will be looking at that. I know certainly we've started to play around with it and toy with it, but we haven't implemented yet. But I'm hopeful that that's something we could look to introduce in the next year or two.
Yeah, wonderful. You just mentioned a learning curve, and I guess a learning curve, you can only learn if you get information and feedback that you can learn from. So probably it's a little nice side effect of the tools that you're using are not only allowing you to improve, but also to further improve based on the results of these new tools. Phil, I'd like to conclude your case study with the last question that I would also like to ask the other speakers. So Daniel, Craig, and Corey, if you could please join us again, that'd be great. Now, Phil, here's the question. It's a bit long maybe, but as you are implementing the latest digital tools that are making the customer journey as personal as possible, isn't there a risk that this whole automation process may actually turn it into something quite impersonal? And what I'm trying to say is that ultimately a client's preference, a prospective student's preference, is to, especially about such an important and once in a lifetime decision on where to study and what would be to get some personal advice from an actual person. What is your view on this, and how do you manage to keep a healthy balance between personalized and personal?
Yeah, that's a good question. And my answer to that would be, I think it's important that you offer a range of marketing channels for consumers to access. I'm sure that, for instance, face-to-face meetings and fairs are going to return at some point, but this isn't going to suit everybody. And some are going to still prefer to have a digital option. So some people are going to search online, they're going to view information on your website, they're going to follow up with your social media channels, they're going to sign up for more information, they want to receive emails, they want to watch videos, they want to watch webinars. It's a pick and choose option. And I think as long as you can offer that, I think students will be happy with that experience. Digital, as I touched on, digital does also provide immediacy as well, which if you're just waiting to meet someone face to face, that's not going to happen unless you have these channels available. So I do think that, yes, there's a risk, but as long as you manage that risk and you offer all these channels, I don't see it as a problem. Indeed, I think CRM and digital is going to be expected from all universities in the next 5 to 10 years. It's not going to be a luxury that people are going to, would like to have that, but we can't do it at the moment. I think it's going to be a necessity in the years to come. It's
not an either or indeed. So Danielle, your response, please.
I think the key point is that you should design your digital experience, your digital journey, focused on emotions and focus on what a personal contact usually delivers. If you manage to do that, if you can go and do a digital experience human-centric, as Corey said at the very beginning, then there should be no problem. In fact, we are a 100% online university, and almost 90% of our students, they say they would repeat their studies fully online.
So you're doing something right. Thank you, Danielle. Craig, I'm sure you have got something to say about this as well.
Yeah, I do. And this is something that I find myself thinking about a lot. And it's you can apply the same question to mode of delivery for education or channels for recruitment. You know, we have all of these new tools available now, as we've been discussing today. And I really like what Phil said earlier. I think that rings really true to me. And I think it just kind of, there's a certain common sense to that, in the sense that this is not an either or proposition. I think that digital solves a lot of challenges that we've always had in recruitment, and especially issues like responsiveness. Everything that we can see in terms of student research says that responsiveness, timing of response, and the accuracy and relevance of response from an institution is absolutely key to moving students through the recruitment process. But also something that we think a lot about in terms of international student recruitment is just that, moving students through an enrollment funnel, through an admissions pathway of one kind or another. And doing that, I think the promise of digital and some of the case studies that we've considered today, what those reveal is that the promise of digital is that it allows you to do a lot of those things a lot more efficiently, right? To expand your reach, to explore new markets and student segments much more efficiently than would otherwise be the case. But the either or part of that is, I think, as you alluded to, Martijn, this is still a very human endeavor. And there's a very strong drive for students to have that personal connection as well. And so I think keeping those things in balance throughout the recruitment process is really key, both from the institution side, but also, as we're also hearing a lot about this year, on the agent side. And, you know, agents are key partners for many institutions in recruitment around the world. And something that has been coming through to us loud and clear in our work this year is that institutions and agents are really leaning into those relationships quite significantly throughout the pandemic, throughout the very fluid environment of the pandemic in particular. And there's every indication to us that agents are going to play a greater role in recruitment after the pandemic, for example. So that, I think, then becomes the question of how you keep those things in balance. And I think Phil really put his finger on it in saying that these are all, you know, the trick is to provide as many different channels and options for students and partners as possible, and to support all of those different key stakeholders in the recruitment process.
Right, so different student demographic, different students, different programs that they want to study, different locations, but also different delivery for these institutions of their information to these students, which could be a range of agencies, digital solutions, a combination of all these things. Probably that's one of the best, always combination. Which brings me, Corey, to you. Corey, I can imagine that the examples today about personalized customer journeys, artificial intelligence, localized marketing require a solid base of efficient and smart data collection and processing, which is, of course, where Salesforce comes in. Can you explain the why and how Salesforce provides the solutions that allow institutions to respond to the changing landscape?
Yeah, I think I start to find the term sort of CRM a little limiting in a way, because that kind of implies a transactional system where constituents are managed. But I think in the broader context, what we're really talking about is human-centric technology. So this is a new wave of systems of engagement that are sort of deprecating the systems of transaction of the past, and making them more part of a back-end plumbing ecosystem. But these touch points with humans matter so much. Fostering that sense of belonging, building that trust network. These touch points matter a lot, and the examples that were given really warm my heart. But back to your original question, Martijn, I believe that done well, the technology actually makes engagement more human, because the humans are able to be deployed for their highest and best value. So, for example, we don't need a human to answer what's the transactional status of my application right now, right? That can be done with a chatbot, and in most cases, that the person making that inquiry is going to have a better experience with the chatbot, which it'll meet them where they live on the device and the channel that they want to work on, right? And I wouldn't prefer to talk to a human if I just want a status update, right? It's some things are better done by a chatbot. But if we can free up our staff to be able to go out and proactively contact a prospect, and build that affinity, build that sense of belonging, and make the case and the value proposition for attending our institution, that's a much better use of humans, and the thing that can actually make education more human centric. So I'm very optimistic about technology. I work in this technology class because I believe that it is the sort of one technology class that can make education better for humanity. So kind of a missionary, a passion worker, I guess. So just really grateful to be able to be working on this wet edge of technology, and really grateful to all of our presenters today who are able to describe how they put it into action on the front lines.
I think you made a very good point just now by making the case that the digital solutions actually help all of us to save time on processes that were before very time-consuming, could be very standardized. That these are now all processed much faster and allows us to free up time to actually deliver that personal, develop that personal relationship with the prospective students. Would you like to talk to some of the application tools actually that Salesforce is proposing to institutions related to the case studies that we have just witnessed?
Yeah, we're really excited to have, just a couple months ago, we released something called Admissions Connect, which is specifically a component within our overall recruitment and admissions offerings, designed to enable and empower admissions teams to do their work better and more efficiently. One of the things that we discovered, and I used to work at Harvard University supporting over 10 professional learning programs, is that the admissions process could be challenging and often hasn't been scaffolded well by technology. And so if the admissions team is not having kind of a good experience with technology, that telescopes through to the applicant experience. So by enabling admissions teams to be more effective, more efficient, and ultimately they can be more responsive to applicants. And I think that that ability to be responsive, to provide information quickly to the applicant, also fosters that sense of belonging. So, moving away from that kind of transactional experience where I applied, I haven't heard anything from you, to being able to do, what Daniel's doing with the one-on-one personalized, tailored response to inquiries, regardless of where they may be in that whole engagement cycle with the institution. That really changes the world, it changes the game. And these are the things that I think can really make education better for all of humanity, because the way we experience education goes way beyond the actual learning. It's that whole outer shell experience, and all the touch points with the institution really matter. We've got certainly the other industries, right, are proving that the experience matters, and often the experience is actually the product. So if we have folks who are out enjoying Netflix or Uber or Apple, right, these are companies where they say their product isn't the product, it's the experience around the product. And they arrive at higher education and they have an experience that resembles something from 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. This isn't the best we can do. We can aspire for more, because personalization and learning matters a whole lot more to humanity than personalization in shopping.
Wonderful. So, Corey, I think you just answered my next question already. You mentioned you worked for Harvard. So the applications that you mentioned and are, of course, developed by automation specialists and IT experts, but this has been done in cooperation with actual student recruitment and admissions professionals, correct?
Right. Yeah, we absolutely wanted to meet our recruitment and admissions professionals where they live with the tools they need, and particularly some tools that were missing. It just didn't exist in the marketplace. So we definitely heard a lot of pain from our admissions professionals, a lot of pain from recruitment professionals, and really tried to fill in those gaps and invent something completely new that never existed before. So, for example, one of our core components is one of my favorite, which is the sort of endless scroll application reader, right? So anyone on any device who's part of the recruitment and admission cycle can view these applications on the under-school reader, but also in context with all of the supporting assets that come in, whether it's essays or grades or scores or anything that may be required to support that, all in one place, single pane of glass. It's absolutely transformational for teams that more typically are running on either a collection of technologies or spreadsheets, semi-manual processes. This is actually pretty common. This really changed the game for those teams. And really previously, I think they were underserved. There just weren't the tools that they needed out there in the marketplace.
That's probably true. Well, thank you, Corey. It's great that Salesforce has such a thorough understanding of our industry with solutions that are developed not only for, but also by enrollment and admissions expert. And for those interested, you can visit sfdc.co/admissions-connect. If you missed that, we'll send you that link in our follow-up email, so don't worry. This actually brings me to the gift I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. Courtesy of Salesforce, everyone will receive a free copy of Salesforce's ebook, The Changing Landscape of Student Recruitment, with not 3, but 5 trends and how universities respond to them. It's a brand new ebook, and Corey, I apologize. I know it's an ebook which you're not supposed to print, but I can tell you that I very much enjoyed reading it. And everyone in the audience, everyone registered for this webinar, including the speakers, will soon receive a copy of this ebook in their inbox, courtesy of Salesforce. And on that note, I would like to thank our speakers of today, Patti, Daniel, Phil, Craig, and Corey, for your inspiring and insightful contributions to today's webinar. Warm thank you to the audience for your valuable time and your feedback polls. We hope to see you again soon at an ICEF webinar or an ICEF event. You'll find them all listed on icef.com. And thank you, of course, to our sponsor, salesforce.org. Thank you very much.